right, we are back with another episode of Casual Conversation with your host, Crooked Forest. Today I'm sitting down with Quizboy from Portland, Oregon. Oregon? I never know the right way to say that, to be honest, as a
I
Canadian.
say Oregon. That's
Oregon.
what I say. I've
There
heard
you
other
go.
people say Oregon. I don't have an emotional investment in it though.
It's one of those weird words that like I'll say it differently all the time, depending on the day. So I might as well check.
And I
Um,
think it matters too, like what your alma mater is, because I'm from Nevada, so I have a firm line and boundary on that one. It's not Nevada, it's Nevada.
oh,
But
there you go.
I'm a transplant to the Pacific Northwest, so
I find I have one of those weird accents that I drift in between like East and West Coast lingo and stuff. So that that falls into the way I pronounce all sorts of different words, and I'm just all over the place, really.
me too. I love to learn jargon. I'll combine traditionalist slang with Gen Z slang. That's my jam right now, you
Oh,
know.
there you go. Half the time it's like I don't even know what I'm saying, honestly.
For real, you nincompoop. You know,
Totally. So, for people that don't know who you are, you're a musician and artist, but you're also a radio show curator, a blogger. You put together compilation albums. You do a podcast. I'm sure there's other things that you do that I'm not even aware of, but I know you do those things.
isn't that enough? Oh my goodness. I don't
I
know
don't
if I can.
know.
I
Like
used to have like not gray hair. Let's just put it that way.
we're all gray now. I dye my hair. Um, yeah, like every time I talk to musicians now, it's like it's they've got a laundry list of other jobs.
I think that is the paradigm of our time, right? The foregone art or the art of just being a musician is kind of gone. I think everybody has to be a content creator. I feel like these days. So same with me. Every musician I've come across is like, yeah, I do that musician stuff, but in order to get some leverage in doing that, I also play games on Twitch, or I do live stream this, or I'm a blogger, or I'm a this or that. I think, yeah, like these days in a content is king driven type of industry, we all are kind of wearing a lot of hats, I feel like.
Do you think that's it's almost weird. Like I think that's always been the case. Like if you were a musician back in the day, you also had other hats for sure, but to the extent of the hats that we wear now, I think is just like gone completely off the deep end.
Yeah, I was watching a true crime podcast yesterday and was super fascinated by it. And this guy's like, he was a very captivating host, and I'm totally a true crime dork, so I was getting into all their stories, and then he drops, in the middle of the podcast, or oh, by the way, I'm plugging my stand-up comedian routine, next Saturday night at the whatever. I'm like,
See,
oh,
that's weird to me. Like I feel like there's got to be it's like we used to talk all the time about separation of church and state, but now it's like we got to talk a bit more like separation of art and but art and content. Like I don't know, it seems like it's too much.
right. It's almost, I think, like going back to the like really old days of, like, I would think like the 1920s or whatever, where it's like, you're gonna be a star, baby, but you also gotta know how to sing and dance. You can't just be in a film.
It's true, but it's like that at least also made sense to me. It's like, okay, dive into like all these creative mediums because it'll make you a better artist. But now it's like, no, dive into business and marketing. And it's like, well, who wants to do that?
Yeah, yeah. And it's a bear too. You almost have to do it out of self-defense, because there's like this predatory sub industry of just people who, want to take you to the next level or upsell you this or that. And so, I
Yeah.
mean, it's almost a have to as an artist, just because you're going to get spammed and ripped off so much if you don't educate yourself somewhat to it.
Yeah, I think it's almost like a more of a control thing more than anything. It's like you get sucked into like doing other people's podcasts or other people's things, and then you're like, I'm not 100% with how they did theirs. I can do my own. And then you get sucked into having your own show like this, I guess.
Yeah, tell me about it. Preach that. I mean, shoot. I keep it where I still enjoy everything. Like I've learned the hard lesson. I think everybody does learn a lesson at some point with burnout and things like that. So these days I am much more mindful of it and able to stay on top of it. And as long as I'm still enjoying everything I do, and can keep up with it to my own self-satisfaction, all right, I'm taking away this thing as a positive thing. Because when you start to feel burned out, that's when you start to question things like, what am I doing it for? Is it worth it? The world and society is always going to tell you, how, it's not worth it if you're not generating a certain cash flow or generating a certain type of, what's the word I'm looking for? Clout or something. So you really
Yeah.
got to ignore that noise and remember what you do it for and what brings you joy.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think you can also you can tell the people that really enjoy doing certain things and like they have an seem to have an easier time keeping up with it than like other people, or they start to fall off because it's just like it becomes too much. Like there's only so many hours in the day, so much energy to you can put towards stuff. Like I don't know.
Right. Right. And then
Anyway,
you add money to it, and that always makes it
well
worse.
that's the worst. We can't involve money in anything anymore because it squanders the joy of everything, I feel.
It skews it for sure. And yet at the same time, we live in this place where it's like you need something to keep the lights on and the overhead, right? This is weird balance. So it becomes this boundary thing of what is willing and acceptable, what is ethical, all that kind of thing.
Totally. I think I find like a lot of artists who, speaking of just money in general, like artists who complain a lot about how like there's no money in music, there's no money in doing their art. So and that's why they start doing like all these other, Twitch streaming and this and that to like generate money, which are also creative ways to make money. But it's like I feel like we stepped away from the part of it where it's like, well, maybe you just gotta like work a normal job, for lack of better word, and like do your day job thing, and then you can spend time and your energy on your art without worrying about so much about that money part of the art, because then that changes your art too.
Totally.
I don't
Yeah,
know.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. I think there's a line, right, and a balance that we tend to lose sight in one direction or the other. I think because I've seen it conversely too, where it's like for artists, like you do deserve those fractions of a penny, right, of whatever it is. Like to see artists get screwed out of fractions of a penny, it's like, yeah, maybe that to the normal person is not, we're not talking about millions of dollars, but you spent time, energy, and invested money into something. And just from the basis of copyright law, someone shouldn't just have the right to use your stuff with no recourse, right? Who
Yeah,
cares if it's a dollar? Give that person the dollar is kind of where I come from on that.
yeah,
And
it's a
when
funny line, like to because it's hard to determine for each person what anything should be worth. Like there's not a set figure, right?
Yeah, I mean, back to your point where I've heard the sentiment expressed as well, where it's like there's no money in the music industry. I say for some, that's the big caveat for me is like, because on the other side, uh Spotify, we'll say it out loud. I'm not gonna go there. I'm not gonna get myself in trouble. I'll be fair and balanced or whatever they want to hear about it. But they make billions upon billions of dollars. They like to brag in their PowerPoint slides that are really nice that say, we paid $9 billion to artists, just that general statement. And I have a podcast episode that's coming out real soon where we did the math on all this stuff, and the maths don't math very good. But when someone's paying out $9 billion, it begs the question, what did you make? Right. So
Yeah.
this is where I don't think that everybody needs to be rich. I don't think, but I think that it's severely disproportioned right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd agree with you for sure. I think it's such a difficult conversation. I feel like we could spend a whole episode like, on just that. Like that's
Oh,
how
I know. I've had to mute my social media. That's why I was like, "Oh, I'm not gonna say it," but because people will want to have this conversation forever, and it's becomes circular, and then eventually people get heightened in emotion, and that's where I got to the spot where I was just like, I'll say my piece because of what I think about it, but I'm willing to walk away from the conversation and do my own thing no matter what.
Yeah, I think a lot of about like as these conversations come up, I'm always reminded about like, okay, but what if we didn't have these streaming services right now? Like, what would it look like instead? And we would still see hordes of musicians complaining about how they were getting ripped off somewhere else. No?
Oh, true, no doubt. I think, unfortunately, or I don't know if that's fortunate or unfortunate, I am old enough to remember that the before times.
Yes.
Um, and I think the thing that we're really complaining about, what happens is we get lost in the weeds of semantics about the pay rates and the streaming services, but the culture has always been to exploit and get all the money first. The industry has always been like, if I can get my arms around all the pile of money first, then I have all the money to pay all the lawyers and all the things to keep me from passing it down the line to the next person. And that's always been the game. These days, it's just digital, with peer-to-peer servers and things like that.
Yeah.
But even in the old days, like we were talking about before, like you gotta be a star. In the old days when they made records, right? I think of the Beatles. In my mind, I have this visual like music used to be black and white until the Beatles came along, because to make records back then, it was like, well, we need someone, they're going to be the star, they're the pretty one, that's the blah blah blah, and then every record needs to have a cover song and a hit song and a love song, and a professional songwriter has to write all that stuff. And it was like the Beatles that came along that kind of changed the paradigm a little bit with Lennon and McCartney, like, no, we write our own songs. It became more artistic. It's
Yes.
always seemed like that's been the struggle, is to bring the art back to the industry, because the industry at some point is always going to suffocate the art because it's always just about the money.
But isn't this sort of like it's sort of the problem in any industry though, is it not? Like as soon as it's like if you're developing any product, if you're developing fidget spinners back when that was like the craze, like
Mm-hmm.
you
Mm-hmm.
still had to suck like hundreds of thousands of dollars into those prototypes, building it, the marketing before they made any money back for something as silly, frankly, as a fidget spinner.
Sure.
When I hear artists complaining like, "Oh my God, my record label totally took like so much money from me that hadn't been generated at this point," um, and then they're complaining about that as if they were slighted. But it's like to me, it's the same thing. The difference is that the human is the product, but that's business. Like I hate trying to be like sounding like I'm on the side of labels and on the side of big industry, but I fail to see how else you do this without
Mm-hmm.
sacrificing a certain level of yourself or your time, your energy, your money to get there.
Yeah, yeah. There's no doubt about it. There has to be an upfront investment. You have to love what you do, right? Like,
Yeah.
you're going to make that upfront investment either in the time, in the form of time, money, or energy. I wholeheartedly agree with that. I would say the caveat, or what the difference I think is when you think of most other industries, and that's why this conversation becomes infinity, right? Because what you're touching on is, we are talking about a culture embedded within music. But you're right, in several other industries, where do we want to go when we start talking politics of all the injustices around when it comes to labor and everything else? But let's just keep it in the realm of music. um, let's think about this. If you were the manufacturer of a fidget spinner, right? uh, did the manufacturers of those fidget spinners get paid last when the sales happened? And that to me is a big difference with musicians, because unless you're going through a label and a publisher, and there's all these other business caveats to it. But let's just assume that you're DIY and independent. You truly manufactured a product, and you are literally the last person in line after the sale, because a sale is a stream of a listener. The last person in line, the manufacturer gets paid last 6 months later. Um, that to me is kind of reverse from other industries.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. We'd have to. That might be a good question to pose to the Shark Tank and Dragon's Den people to see where they fall in that.
Oh, I got some big ideas on that one, man. I had Schuster and Brian Lambert trapped in a room. I was giving them death by PowerPoint the other day about my big ideas from that one. But
That seems like a great opportunity to segue because we got like well, I wasn't even planning on going into that conversation. But
see, this is what happens when we get together. We get crazy. Squirrels.
you and Mark Schuster released a song called "All the Same to You" recently.
Yeah, yeah,
So what?
yeah.
How did you link up with Mark Schuster? Did you find him online as well, or do you know him somehow otherwise?
I did. This is my agent,
There you go.
Alyssa. Sorry. I met Mark online through Twitter, right? He's the king of tweetcore. So I
Yeah.
met the king of tweetcore through Scoopski, actually. Scoopski was my initiation, my jumping into tweetcore, if you will. Scoopski was part of like a Happy New Year's playlist. I saw a bunch of artists on Twitter throwing tracks in. They put it in a playlist. We all celebrated the playlist for a couple days and all got a bump in our listenership. And I was, this is a really cool kind of ethos going on here. And then that's when he laid it on me. Here's the Tweetcore blog that Mark posted, and here's how it was kind of trending a little bit at the time. And it was just off to the races from there. We've been working on all sorts of things. We do a radio show. I'm post production. He does the curation and pre production of everything of the Tweetcore Radio Hour, and I mark the thing and make sure that people get paid their radio royalties and all that business stuff, and schedule it out every week to week.
I
Um,
I love that you guys connected in that way and were able to build this like online partnership in that because I find that it's challenging. It's really challenging to like build sustainable relationships over the internet. And like now, weirdly, more than ever, maybe that's just my perspective on it, but I find it very challenging.
it was a breath of fresh air when I finally started linking up and seeing those Twitter circles be more of my circle too. Because before that, it was a bit of a void um, and awkward. Like I had a story where I was interviewing my buddies from Pent Up band in Seattle on my blog, and I met them through an awkward thing because I almost did without knowing about Tweetcore or getting involved with all the stuff that's going now. There's this Facebook thread that was going back and forth, and people were dropping links and sharing things with each other. And so I did this thing where I was like, hey, look, everybody involved in the conversation. I put a playlist together of all our stuff and all the things we talked about, right? High five. And it was not met with high five. I had somebody DM me on the side, tear me a new asshole over being like, that was my thread. I was trying to suck up all this attention out of it and be a total asshole to me about it and then block me. And I was like, this is weird. So to go from that to Scoopski and people and everybody all in, hands in the middle, whoa, Bundy. I was like, this is a breath of fresh air. This is amazing. Like more people, this is how artists should interact with each other.
No, definitely. Yeah. Like I find there's so much of that. I just had to block somebody the other day, yesterday, probably this morning. I don't know. Because they came out of the woodwork, never talked to them before, and they weren't even saying anything at me, but I kind of just poked on their page for a second. I was just like, your energy is weird, and you're taking like weird ownership over stuff that I don't understand. Um,
Mm.
and I don't know why like those people are the loudest on the internet, aren't they?
It always is. Those folks are always the loudest. That's why you can't fool yourself into the perception that everybody's like, I'm trying to maintain some optimism. If you listen to my music, you wouldn't expect that coming from me at all. But there has to be this lining of optimism that there is something out there. It's just the worst tend to be the noisiest.
It's also a great thing that you just said to remind me to ask, like, you're doing okay, right? You have a lot of song titles that I, when I started listening through your repertoire, I was like, oh my God, this is gonna be a little dark and intense. Like you have a song called like I Hate Myself,
Yeah, I
um,
hit myself and I want to
and I
die.
Want to Die, and I was like, man, I hope this guy's okay.
It's a polka song, really. A doo-wop meant for proms.
Your album that I listened to from last year is called Deadbeat. It's very intense, but it's very like moody. But I really like it. It's very cool. It's like a hardcore I don't know, hardcore and grungy kind of vibe. I haven't listened to a ton of
Yes.
hardcore lately, so I don't know who to like pinpoint it as to who it sounds like. I don't know, maybe you could offer some suggestions for people that are listening and want to listen to it. It's a very cool record though.
Definitely, definitely. Hardcore is something deeply embedded. But I can't really, and people gatekeep keep the term hardcore in certain genres, subgenres of punk rock and stuff. So I don't really like wave a flag for it. But yes, I love hardcore, post-hardcore, punk rock of all varieties. I don't care if it's pop punk, scum punk, um,
I don't even know what that
whatever.
is. What is scum punk?
Oh, it's just to be a scummy bastard. Like I don't know if I can say that.
Okay.
One of my favorite bands is the Retards, and I know that's a
Oh
bad
yeah.
word, but I love Jay Retard. He did amazing stuff out of Nashville, um, stuff like that. I mean, I guess we would probably call it lo-fi, but like to be lo-fi back then just meant to be broke.
Yeah,
Sometimes you
okay.
had a
Yeah.
suitcase and you hit it with a drumstick to get a backbeat.
It's a cool
Or you had
sound.
producers that didn't have drum mics, or maybe only had two drum mics. That's kind of how the DIY was back in the day. You
Yeah.
really just made records that you could afford to make, and
Yeah. Now
so
now you're peeling through plugin lists for like a 1980s grunge sounding shitty
right,
amplifier.
right now I gotta get a special plug-in to
I
sound
gotta
like I'm
spend
broke in the
yeah.
in the '90s.
Oh yeah,
It's
exactly.
weird,
I'm gonna spend $200 on this plugin that's gonna make it sound like it's breaking.
right? Yeah. I
Which,
just unplug
which
my
that
power supply so I can get that unwanted feedback again.
yeah, which like no shame in doing that either. Like the tools are there for people to use however you want to use them. But it is a funny thing because you go back and listen to like some of these older records, you're like, wow, how did they get that sound? And it's like they literally could only make that sound. They didn't know how.
Right.
Like, there's no way
Yeah.
around it.
At
Um,
the time, they were wanting to make a different sound, but that's what the budget
yeah,
allowed for.
that's all
So,
they had. That's
yeah.
literally all they had at their disposal. Um, I'm trying to jumping around because I wanted to touch on a few of your different releases.
Hmm.
But you also did a cover of Fool's Gold, sorry, by the Fits and the Tantrums, which I really,
Yeah.
really liked. I
Oh, thank you.
listened
Yeah.
to yours and then I listened to the original. Um, Quite a difference.
Yeah.
Fundamentally similar instrumentally. You can hear all that, but because of your vocal style, it's so different. But I think yours is like way catchier and way more like it makes you want to sing along to it. I don't know, maybe
Oh,
because
man, I really appreciate that. Thank you.
it's very, very cool. I want everyone to check it out because, and I want them to like listen to it back to back with the original because it's such a stark contrast. But I think you did an amazing job on that one, and you did that one with. Did you do that one with Brian or no?
Yes. Yeah. Well, Brian does some low backups during the chorus and then the backups on the outro, and he also mastered it for me.
Oh,
Yeah.
there you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a cool collaboration too that you found Brian for that one. I like all these
Yeah.
guys that you've collaborated with. I don't remember how I started speaking to any of you over over Twitter. It just seemed to happen over the last couple years. Like slowly, everyone trickled on into my timeline over time. Uh,
Exactly. That's
and I
tweetcore, baby.
yeah, it has legs. It definitely has some legs. Which is very cool. But it's great to when I've listened through these songs and I'm like, oh, and this is this collaboration and that collaboration, and I love that you guys have all connected to do them. I think they've all turned out really well.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, yeah. That fits in the tantrum song. I think that's my approach to every cover song is to be like I appreciate that so much, but when I attempt it, I'm not going to be able to be that. So
Yeah.
how can I express that in the way that is me?
Yeah, no, I love that because that's always been sort of the way I look at covers too. It's like sometimes you hear somebody cover it and you're like, wow, that's great. You sound exactly like that singer. That's cool. But
Right.
also like not that cool because you sound exactly like that singer. Like it's like, where's your voice? I don't know. Like it's a skill. It's an incredible skill to be able to do that. But I love when like someone like yourself, yeah, you take it and you made it completely your own and it's to me it like really exceeded my expectations, whatever my expectations were. um
No. No.
I thought it was fantastic. Why did you want to cover that song? Do you spend a lot of time thinking about what songs you're going to cover, or did it just be like you're listening to it one day and you're like, let's mess around with it?
That one, I used to have once upon a time ago a little bit more of a repertoire for playing like acoustic guitar, and I used to like open mic things and stuff like that. And that was something that was just kind of in my songbook of covers and stuff I had when I would do open mics and stuff like that. And I've
Nice.
just always really enjoyed the song, and putting it on wax was very much just a spur of the moment. I had a wild hair and decided to put something on wax. That was it with that one.
Do you enjoy the process of like when you're collaborating with people online, you're sending those files back and forth? Do you find it like cumbersome at all that it's going back and forth? Do you find it comes together quickly? Like how has it been for you?
I could see how it could be cumbersome, but from my own personal experience, I haven't had a cumbersome experience, and I think that might be because I am a bit selective. I don't want to come off like a dick or nothing, but I am kind of mindful of that, of who I collaborate with. I really like look for like-minded people, people that are just really tracking. It makes it a lot easier for me to collaborate. It would be awkward if I was just like a blind date collaboration, like here's another artist, you guys make a hit or something. I'd be like, oh, this is weird. So do you like Ninja Turtles? Yeah. I
But what if it turns out awesome at the same
Well,
time?
then when that turns out awesome, you build a rapport and there's that connection, and we're probably going to collaborate on a shit ton more things. Is kind of how that goes.
Totally.
Yeah,
Oh man, I can't believe how fast the time has been rolling here. I want to touch more. I'm gonna put all your like a bunch of your music links in the blog because that's important for people to
yay,
listen to, and we can get into that. But I do want to touch on a bit more on like your radio show, what you do. You have some compilation albums coming up. I know we were kind of briefly talking about.
yeah.
What can you tell people of? Are you still looking for people for those? What's the story there?
All right, yeah. So we'll move on to we'll touch on the compilations right quick. There's two that are coming out. The first one is music that changed my life. So it's a pooling of artists. It's kind of within that tweet core ethos, right? Of like the way we tackle this thing is we could all cover a song of something that's changed our life or that we deeply resonate with, but what happens if we pool our interest and put it out in the market? Then we're all kind of working together to promote the same thing, is the idea behind the compilations in general. But that's what that first one is think about a song that impacted your life, that deeply resonated with you. And then I tell you, we have 16 artists lined up for that. And the toughest thing so far out of everything in that collaborative effort has been picking which one, because there's so
Yeah.
many songs that I meandered over. Some people up until the wire are still undecided, but they know that I just want to be part of that type of thing. That one's coming out sometime in August, sorry. And we got 16 artists so far in that one. The second one is Boys Don't Cry, and we're almost to the same spot we are with the first one I mentioned. But Boys Don't Cry is about covering an artist of a gender different than yourself that you appreciate, and that's really what the ethos is behind it, is to show how music connects beyond just these differences that we want to fight about. So cover the some an artist of a different gender that you appreciate, and don't change the pronouns. And that was a weird one, but I wanted to, because I wanted it to kind of reflect that um even when it's someone speaking from their own self, that we're all human, we all feel the same things, we all can connect. So it's not important to go out there, and if I cover something that's done by a female, I have to change all the he's to she's and all that kind of thing. So that was kind of the idea behind that one.
I like that.
um
That's a really cool idea because I found like when I first started doing covers here and there, I'd find myself in that predicament. I don't care to like I'll sing the song as it's written. This doesn't matter to me really. But at the same time, it was as I started doing covers that I was like, as a woman being like, wow, a lot of the music I listen to is from the perspective of a man, and it doesn't wholly
right.
cater to me. So the odd time I would start changing the pronoun to make it because I was like, I still love that message, but I'm going to change that pronoun for me in this moment. I go
Right.
their way with it. I don't think it matters that deeply, but it was something that I kind of started to catch on to, being like, wow, I've been listening to a lot of music from the perspective of a man my whole life, and
Right.
like what
Right.
that does to you. I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, like personalizing it so that I mean, we were just talking about fool's gold, right? Personalizing it, it's not a thing like I want to put it out there like that or pass any judgment. It's purely an effort just to show authentic appreciation for
Totally.
someone else different. Yeah.
I love that. I think those are going to be really cool compilations.
I'm really excited about I really want to get the update out on email for Boys and because I think a lot of the artists' choices and what they picked is really cool. And I just changed mine today because that was another one. I was like, I'm gonna have to write a blog. I think of like honorable mentions of all these female artists that I just totally appreciate and could not come up with a song. I started with like a Beach Bunny song, and then as of today, the hot breaking news is that I've been learning the chords and putting to wax a Supreme song.
Nice.
Keep Me Holding On is the one I'm going with because that's just a
Awesome.
incredible Motown song.
Oh, there's so much good Motown. Motown
And
is
you
will never be bad to me.
no, how did they? That was
Why
what a
why are
time
there
capsule.
why are there not more artists doing Motown today, you know? Like what happens?
Yeah, yeah. I think a lot of that has become derivative into other types of genres. But yeah, the time capsule of just that moment in time is like
Yeah.
remarkable.
No, yeah, it's such an incredible distinct sound. Like it has this whole aura about it. I don't know.
It's a music that I could put on when I'm sad or happy and reinforce either one of those feelings. It's
Yeah,
pretty remarkable.
so true. Oh man. I can't believe we're already almost running out of time. And just before we start to wrap up, I wanted to super briefly, we won't get into it because there's no way we have time for it. But you're like a bit of a conspiracy theorist, I understand. You're
Yeah,
a bit
well,
of a tinfoil hat kind of person.
I am, but I'm very specific about my tinfoil hats. I don't believe the Earth is flat or none of that shit. But I do think Kurt Cobain was murdered. That's the one. That's the kick I'm on right now. Yeah.
I saw the a link that you posted from a new source. I don't know how new he is, but new to me.
Yeah, new to me at the time of sharing too. Yeah.
Interesting guy. I wish we had time. We might have to meet up again and do another chat just to talk about this Kurt Cobain thing because I'm
This could be
almost
an entire episode of its own. Like I've done the research, bro. I've been in this rabbit hole.
me too. Like I went down it a few years back and like I went down it pretty deep and I was like really, really deeply invested in the story. And on one hand, I always kind of feel bad when I get too tinfoily about stuff, especially when it's like a case where somebody has passed away and they don't have any sort of say in the conversation that's going on. Um, but uh what there's so many questions about what happened with that whole situation and so many things that were just very poorly not done, things that were not
Yeah.
done that should have been done, that make it impossible to come to a full understanding and appreciation of what really happened that day unless you were there.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I think that at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to is that uh, police protocol wasn't followed and you can't make up for past mistakes. I mean, like one of the things is I think they cremated his body in an inordinate amount of time. It was like 24 or 48 hours. You just basically decimated any potential evidence to answer any of these questions forever.
Yeah.
Um, and you that should be really something that stands out to people because when does that ever happen in any kind of high profile? It doesn't even have to be a high profile case to have the cause of death and cremation happen that quickly. When you think about some of these other high profile ones like Chris Cornell or Chester Bennington, right? How many weeks,
Yeah.
months did we go before they came out and actually said what happened? And in this one, it was like by noon, it was on TV and they already had the narrative. And
Yeah, it always makes you wonder, you're like, what was the rush here? Why were you in such a hurry? What else was going on that made you so quick to put this bow together? Um,
yeah,
Questionable. We don't have enough time for it, but I did want to touch on it because I watched the link that you sent and I was like, oh my God, it opened up the rabbit hole again. I was like, oh God, do I
I
want
got the smoking gun for you, though. I'll leave you with the smoking gun.
Okay,
It's like,
okay, we
you
got
tell
like
me. You tell me how or why somebody would kill themselves and you would not have fingerprints on the bullets or the gun.
I know that
You
makes
t-
no sense. That makes
you
no
t-
sense.
you tell me how and why that happens, especially if it's a suicide.
Yeah.
Um, and I will relinquish my tinfoil hat.
Yeah, I'm with you there. That's one thing. I'm not a in law enforcement or in any way or have that deep of an understanding of firearms, but I do understand fingerprints are a thing. And I don't know what happened there. I don't know. We're gonna have to wait for if that guy ever releases his documentary, since he seems to have a bunch of other people that we've never heard from before.
Yeah, I took the clickbait. He's done a lot of high profile cases and other true crime stuff
But he
apparently.
seems like a bit of a wackadoodle. Like, though he comes across that way, I guess a lot of us do when we
Yeah.
talk about stuff like this. But he was very intense.
Is he a wackadoodle or is he passionate? That's always the thing I
You
say
can
when
be
people
both.
call me
You can be
crazy.
both.
I'm not crazy, I'm just passionate.
We have to wrap up because we're about to get booted off. But I'm going to say
Not the first time I've heard that.
thank you so much for talking with me today, and hopefully we can chat again very, very soon and dive a bit further into all this stuff and more about your music and the compilations.
I would love to. Thank you for having me. I very
All right.
much appreciate it.
Thanks very much. I'm gonna stop the recording, and that's it for us.
Woohoo! One in the bank.